All right, here we go. Hey, Dashi Miller here with this week's episode of KUDEN Radio, episode 210, I think. I made the slides. You'd think I would know. Anyway, a little bit more on the next program that I've been promising for a couple of weeks, and I'll talk about that when we get started. But there's a new term that I've been using here recently: strategic flexibility. Right, and we're going to talk about that and obviously some other related things as soon as we get started. All right, so I will talk to you real soon.
Question is this: how are self-defense and success-minded people like us, concerned citizens worried about protecting ourselves, our loved ones, and the things we care about from the monsters we know exist in the world? How do we train in a way that gives us the skills, knowledge, and understanding we need without becoming paranoid fighters or killers ourselves, and yet still allows us to be the hero protector the world needs us to be? That's the question, and this podcast will give you the answers. My name is Jeffrey Miller, and welcome to KUDEN Radio, real training for real people in a real world.
All right, that's still the story. 210 episodes in, that's still the story, right? Anyway, okay, so thanks for joining in, and what we're going to be doing is continuing on with these bricks or blocks that I started about 11 episodes ago. So what we're going to take a look at this time is this idea of strategy and approaches that we take, right? So again, it's going to be another one of those walks around the mandala for those of you who know what I'm talking about. And if not, for those of you who don't, no worries. I will explain it. Right. But first off, let me just jump in with some things. I've got some folks they've been chomping at the bit for a while with this re-release of our Module 3 intermediate training program. And I really have to apologize. It was supposed to be out and kicked off as of last Monday. And my wife and I are fighting a battle here, not with each other. We have an issue going on with the mother-in-law, and just we needed to get her moved and all those kind of things, which is what I spent 2/3 of my day today doing. So just bear with me. I'm working as hard as I can, but also making sure that I'm taking care of family and things are going on in that route. So within the next day or two, well, by tomorrow, there will be an email coming out that will let everybody know official start and all that. I have everything almost where it needs to be. I've just really had to split my my attention, my energy, and all that. Things are well. It's just this was one of those things that was an unexpected kind of family emergency, we'll call it. And so I really appreciate everyone's patience, understanding, that kind of thing. But James and I are looking forward to, again, here's that pun, right? Kicking things off, because I am by nature a fiery person. And so can't wait to dive into this one. But we are going to be addressing some of that stuff this evening. So as I've rolled out some emails, some articles, things like that over the past couple of weeks, as we've been priming the pump, so to speak, one of the phrases that I have settled upon is this idea of strategic flexibility. And we'll talk about that more as we go through this episode. But to help folks understand things a little bit better, each of the modules that we have that lead from white belt to first degree black belt tend to focus on a certain emotional state that we could be in going into a situation. I know, I think it was the last episode, we kind of touched on these things, went around the mandala and whatnot. But it's not just that, it's also a choice, right? Based on assessing the situation. Okay. And I don't just mean assessing what he's all about or assessing my emotional state. There could be lots of things in there. Again, in a recent email, it's okay if you didn't get it or you didn't see it or whatever. Google tends to send more things to promotions and social folders, even the stuff that you want. But what I took a look at in one of them was many different reasons why you might choose a certain approach, right? James, was that something I covered during Whiteboard Wednesday? All these lessons are just bleeding together, and they have been for a long time. I think maybe I covered it on Whiteboard Wednesday as well, right? So what we were looking at is, I could choose any given strategic approach for resolving a situation. And again, this could be on the battlefield. And when I say battlefield, it could be a back alley. It could be one of my Leos handling, a situation or whatever, right? But you're handling conflict, right? So it could be on the battlefield, but it could also be in life, right? I mean, life has plenty of challenges as well, right? It could be, who knows? It could be a financial strain. It could be this approach that I'm dealing with at the moment, or not approach, but situation, where it was a family emergency where we had to get my mother-in-law moved within a couple of weeks, right? And long story, no time, but right, it could be that kind of a challenge. It could be somebody yelling and screaming at you. It could be somebody trying to impose their will, ideals, agenda, whatever, right? The pushy salesman, all kinds of things, right? So this works on either side. We just need to understand that from a 30,000 foot view, or maybe just a 3,000 foot view, right? We're in the hot air balloon over the sports stadium, that kind of thing. This is really all about conflict resolution, right? Handling the shit in life, right? Coincidentally, for those of you who are not in my Mikyo programs, there's a Sanskrit word, Pali word too. They sound very, very similar. I'm not going to split the difference on them. Your ear would have to be tuned to be able to pick it up. But there's a Sanskrit word, and since English is in the Sanskrit language family, not that matters, but there's this term, dukkha, right? Dukkha, typically spelled Dukkha, dukkha, right? What does dukkha sound like? Yeah, dookie, right? Sounds like caca, right? Poop, shit, right? Dukkha is a word that is not easily translated into English, although kind of sounds like something, right? But it can mean everything from dissatisfaction to outright suffering to discontent to confusion to frustration to disorientation. So all kinds of things, right? Dukkha is actually a compound word that, and for those of you who've been training with me for a while, I'm really big on kanji and roots and things like that, because the past masters, whether they were on the life mastery side or they were on the martial side, while sometimes names are chosen as a way to hide a technique, more often than not, a name is chosen either because it points directly at something that you're doing, right? Or it points to something that is symbolic, right? For instance, right, in the scrolls, in the Koto school, there's a technique called kyogi, right? Kyogi. And while you can translate kyogi, right, into meaning something, there's a secret within there, right? There is a point on the foot where the toe bones plug into the foot bones. Okay. I always just say the foot where the toes plug into the foot. It's that connection, right? That's called kyogi. And so the way I was introduced to this, and I'm not arguing with anybody that was introduced to it different ways or whatever, right? This is a point that you attack and it's not the instep, right? It's not toki, right? T-O-K-I. It's not the same one. That's farther up the foot. Kyogi is, remember, it was a barefoot and sandal-based society. So as you're, dealing with these incoming attacks and whatnot, you have this opening, or you create this opening by shifting your lead foot forward. You're in a Seigan, Bobi, something like that, right? You slide your foot forward, and you come down with the edge of the heel on this point to snap that connection, and it causes the leg to buckle, right? And then as he's dropping, you kill him, right? So again, that's the name points to something that's important in the technique, right? Do this thing, right? But there's other ones like Seon, right? Moon in the water, right? That points directly to something that's at our Mikyo. That's this reference to a mind that is unattached and reflects equally on all things, right? Pretty deep shit, right? Anyway, but dukkha, there's this idea that without a correct perspective, right? That's how life is experienced, right? And if you want to get off the wheel, so to speak, right, then it requires a shift in perspective, right? Anyway, there's a bunch of these things that go on, but so this strategic flexibility. Again, I've been teaching on this, emails, whiteboard Wednesday, that kind of thing. But in the back of my mind, there's still this old saying, this old adage, right, that just runs contrary, right, to this idea, right? Strategic flexibility. We'll come back to this in a minute, because I want to connect the dots, so to speak, right? And maybe you've heard this saying or one like it. I know a bunch of you are from different countries and whatnot, so there could be little spins on it, or it could be the same. Master, or what is it? Jack of all trades, master of none, right? Jack of all trades, master of none, which is how the ninja were described by a lot of reporters way back in the day. And when I say back in the day, I mean like in the late 70s, early 80s, even into the mid 80s, because it's this composite system. And so there's all this stuff. So there's this belief that you can't master everything. So, right, you become the jack of all trades, but you're not going to master anything, right? And so the people that typically came up with this had this idea that, you get good at one thing, right? You master this thing, and that's your thing, right? And so that it's not that doesn't have merit. It has tons of merit, right? All philosophies have merit. That pause was intentional within the area being focused on, right? So whenever somebody comes at you with some kind of idea, ideology, agenda, suggestions, whatever, the first question that needs to pop up is, what's the agenda, right? What's the outcome that they're looking for? Okay. Or what's the area that they got really good at? And so that holds true there. For instance, and I was just sharing this with some folks in a class the other night. I had there was a guy that was in one of my military police units a long time ago. Where were we? What was then West Germany? So we got to talking about self-defense and whatnot, because at that point I had been appointed as the self-protection and handgun training instructor for the unit, right? They ended up seeing me handle things on the street. I had kind of explained where it all came from. Ta-da, this stuff. And so the leaders decided that, and at that point we didn't have a I'll justify that in a minute. We didn't have the self-defense training that the military instituted a decade and a half, almost about that, maybe decade and a half ago, right? So we didn't have that kind of thing. What we had was military police school, and then a refresher every 6 months to a year of what I called the government six. And there were these 6 techniques that you had to qualify on. That was just it was bullshit training, because it was a CYA for the government, right? You know what CYA stands for? Cover your ass, right? But it wasn't covering my ass or any of the other soldiers. It was, right. We trained them. I don't know what to tell you, right? So anyway, uh, so we uh, we were having this conversation, right, about self-defense and protection and dealing with things, right? And as is usually the case, from my observation, my experience in life, whenever the topic for me, whenever the topic of self-defense, fighting, martial arts, fill in the blank, right, comes up, there's always some yahoo in the group that's listening in, watching the demo, whatever, that has to come up and regale me with the time that they whip somebody's ass or their favorite technique or the thing they always know or whatever, right? Um, and this conversation led in that direction as well. During our conversation, I find out that he is a former Golden Glove boxer. That's cool. Awesome. Very, very cool. Right. I said, how's that working out for you as a military policeman when you have to apprehend people? Well, not so well, because you can't just like duke it out with somebody on the street. Right. You got to restrain, you have to control, use of force, those kind of things. Right. Okay, great. He said, but the one thing that has always stuck with me over all these years is something that my coach told me. Right. And that is never punch a guy in the chest. It doesn't hurt. And my brain locked up, right? I don't know if you've heard any of these things, right? Hopefully you don't have any of these dumb shit ideas in your head, but, and I'm assuming you don't because everybody that jumps on these podcasts are already enlightened. So we're all good, right? So I said, wait, what? And he said, yeah, you punch a guy in the chest. I said, you do understand that was in the context of boxing with gloves on, right? With 5 inches of cotton between your knuckles and his chest and whatever, right? It spreads the force out. No. I know. He would never lie to me. I trust him. Okay, great. So besides having regular formal classes with the military police officers within the unit, I'm going to call them officers, even though we were enlisted. Most of those people, and I truly do believe that it's the 80-20 rule applies. It might even be 90-10, right? And Carl can, vouch for this and a bunch of my other guys that are Leos and security guys, that most of these guys, unless they're forced to go to a training or whatever, or unless we're talking about an elite unit where that's who was recruited, right? Most of these folks won't get their own, they won't get their own training, right? Now, unless again, you're in an exception to the rule kind of unit, that's just, again, been my experience and it's still my observation today. But I ran a training group as well. And that was for people that wanted to come to class. They wanted to get this stuff nailed down. And so he came to one of these classes, and I can't remember if it was that night. It was within a couple of days, right, of this conversation. And we're just working a technique, and he took a knuckle. He came up to demonstrate and whatnot, and he took a knuckle or something to the middle of his sternum. And it wasn't like really hard. It was bone to bone, right? And next thing you know, he's kneeling in front of me and I'm patting him on the shoulder. Are you okay? Are you okay? And he catches his breath and he said, he lied. I said, who lied? My coach. He lied. I said, he didn't lie. I told you when we had this conversation, right? That lesson is true in the context of a boxing match, right? In the context of street, no gloves, no protective padding, no chest guard, nothing like that. There's a reason that these pressure points, and I'm using the term pressure point loosely. A lot of you already understand, right? The term Kyusho, right? In Japanese, Kyusho does not mean pressure point. Right? I did a whiteboard Wednesday, probably one of our first ones, wasn't it, James? Way back, right? Where I covered like 5 different types of Kyusho. I went deep into 4 of them. The 5th one is medical purposes, right? The same Kyusho can be used to heal or hurt. But one of those categories were pressure points, things that you actually apply pressure to, and it causes a pain response, you hope, right? The way most people think of quote unquote pressure points. But the word Kyusho doesn't mean pressure point. Kyusho itself translates to weak point, right? And there's a wide variety of these things, right? So anyway, that was his wake up call, right? That you know, my wife is now home and my dog is running out of my office, so I'm going to get up and close the door. All right, we'll let them have their moment and not impede on the podcast. Anyway, all right. So, so again, there's this thing, and if someone is studying for something very, very specific, right? If they're training for something very specific, right? If they are going to be they're going to be a fencer, right? And I don't mean like the guy who takes baling wire and some stakes and puts it out in his farm pasture. I don't mean that kind of fencer, right? The guy with the epi and the he's doing French fencing, what we think of as a Olympic sport. Okay, yeah, right. You don't want to go mixing that with katana work, right, or using a claymore or a broadsword or something like that, because it's not going to help, right? The strategy and everything is different, right? In French fencing, you have to stay on a given line. There's certain things you get good at that, so you develop strategy and tactics from that perspective. But right, there's this hard line paradigm, right? If you're going to be doing kendo, right? Kendo, shinai, full armor, that kind of thing. You can do some crossing over when it comes to like kenjutsu and working with the katana and things like that. But there's going to be a point where you really have to understand and differentiate things, right? The strategy is going to cross, the tactics are going to cross, but the techniques not going to cross, right? Because everything that we would go after in a bato jutsu or a kenjutsu situation, right, when we're attacking them with our sword or touching them with our sword, is illegal in kendo, right? The things that they go after in kendo are fully armored parts of the opponent's body, right? You would never go after that with a sword, right? If you were in a Mortal Kombat kind of thing, right? So one has to be really, really clear about the goal, right? If my goal is to be a boxing champion or an MMA guy or whatever, right? And I get it, they do some mixed, whatever, right? Or I'm just going to get into jujitsu and do the whole ground fighting, grappling, restraint, those kind of things. Then absolutely, man, go all in, right? But if we're looking at real world self protection, and this is I'm not talking about confusing fighting with self defense, because again, as a cop, and I don't know if Carl's had the same experience or some of my other guys have had the same experience or not, but 9 out of 10 people that I pulled apart that were fighting on the street, right, or in a bar or whatever, right, swore to God they were just defending themselves, right? But it's not the same. It's not the same, right? Self-defense is a legally definable thing that has very specific parameters to it, right? If you cross the line, then you're either fighting or it's assault, right? So, but in that kind of a situation, since we have no idea what danger is going to look like, when it's going to happen, the environment I'm going to be in, or so where it happens, right? The intensity, my condition, his condition, right? You could be the most fit person in the world, but if you're like down with the flu and have to go to the pharmacy or you have to, run out for something because honey's sick too, and you're, going to go do it, or you got a sick kid, and again, you're ill, right? And you're not at top par, or you just injured something, right? Um, it's not the same, right? It's not the same. So, also, right? Again, in this, again, you have to forgive me. I don't remember at the moment if it was an email, if it was Whiteboard Wednesday, or I mentioned it in both. It doesn't really matter, right? But and I keep mentioning my Leos and professional security guys. They're constrained by use of force limitations, which I think everybody should wire into their training. But use of force, where are you? What are the circumstances? Because these things might dictate that we use a very specific strategic approach to handling the situation, right? But if we are a one and done, I call it a one trick pony. I don't know if that translates across lines or not, but somebody who's either really, really good at only one thing, or um, I remember a conversation that I had with somebody a bunch of years back, where they said that they can't help themselves, right? Whenever, if somebody says something, right, off the cuff and it's offensive, right, they can't help themselves, right? They got to jump up and throw hands. Okay. Well, good luck at, in defending yourself in court or whatever. Well, that's always been a problem. Well, there's a reason that's a problem, right? Not just because you have a hairpin trigger, but you only have one way of dealing with certain types of situations. And I get it. I'm not talking about somebody talking smack as opposed to somebody throwing punches and kicks as opposed to somebody with a knife. I'm talking about having 3 or more ways of handling each one of those things, because the situation dictates approach, right, for a successful outcome. Right, a lot of you have been around for the lesson where every attack, right, comes with 3 attackers, and I don't mean multiple attackers, right? I mean that's a whole different ballgame. I'm talking about one attacker, right? One assailant, one attack, right? You're still likely to handle up to 3 attackers, right? One is the guy that's coming at you in the moment. As a matter of fact, James, if I miss this, remind me of something that Erskine and I just discussed and shared today. We shared a video on, I don't know if it was my Prepared Defenders group, or I don't know. Anyway, we had this discussion. So you have the guy that you're dealing with, right? And even if you win, right? Even if you win, I know that sounds negative, but even if you win, right? You may still need to deal with the post trauma on yourself, right? Even if you handle it, right? And you got that, I'm okay, I'm good, I'm okay. As long as the adrenal response is firing, your mental processing is going to be different, right? The acuity, right? The sharpness is not going to be there. Okay. The muscles, right, are either going to be still buzzing, or you're going to have this post incident decompression, so to speak, right, where there's a huge just drop, right, in energy, and that's going to affect emotions, head, and all that kind of stuff, right? So it doesn't matter if it takes minutes, hours, days, weeks, whatever, right, to get back to 100%. You still need to get things done in there, whether it's job, family, whatever, right? And so this second attacker isn't the guy that assaulted you; it's your own system, right? That has backfired on itself, right? And we need to run techniques or processes or whatever, if we've armed ourselves with them beforehand, to get back on track, right? And then, regardless of whether you had to deal with that one, there may be legal issues that you have to deal with, right? So, and that could be literally the law, like the cops show up and there's a DA that wants to make a point, or it's internal and you are one of my guys, right? One of my Leos, one of my security guys. And so now you have departmental policy, you have internal reviews, you might have to deal with. Here it's called internal affairs. I don't know. I know there's different names for it in Canada and some other places, but either way, right? You give them your sidearm, you're relieved of duty, and or you get desk duty while they do the investigation on the shooting or the arrest or whatever to make sure that they're okay with what you did. So again, that comes with its own. That may loop back to the post trauma kind of thing and feed into that. So this is not an easy cut and dry kind of thing, right? Anyway, so but there's this one trick pony kind of thing. As you know what, that reminds me of another story, and this actually comes out of Ninjutsu training, um, uh, way back early in my training. Right there, there's a lot of people that get drawn to martial arts. They've never been in a fight. They've never been attacked. They're not police, security, or whatever, where this is an everyday possibility or potential where you're going to have to end up, either getting somebody off of you, getting somebody off of somebody else, or literally having to, get somebody who's not going easily, right, into handcuffs, into the vehicle, whatever. There's this. There's this. My brain just skipped a beat. Sorry. Let's just keep going. So there's this idea that you can just take one thing. You just I know what I was doing. It was this other story, right? And so this was obviously from somebody who they were in the martial arts for martial arts, and what they said was we were having a conversation about techniques and doing things, and they said, yeah, I know that we have all these things, but I have to start with this first move. And I think what they were talking about was like an ichimonji with a counter strike, like an uki nagashi kind of thing, right? I have to start with this thing all the time. If I can't start with that, I'm lost. I have no idea what to do. Hope nobody ever grabs them like in a bear hug or in a choke or whatever, where they can't do that first thing, right? And again, that's just another iteration of this one trick pony kind of idea. So again, if we were on a SWAT or SRT team, if we were on we were in a special forces group, right? SEAL team, Green Beret, special forces, whatever, right? Across different groups. We may have a specialization, right? Like the best shooter with a long arm. I don't mean their arms are long. I mean with a rifle, right? Maybe just that their job is right sniper, right? So that's their thing. So they're going to cover for the team, whatever. Somebody might be specialized in they're the doc for the team, right? So their specialization is medical kind of stuff, right? Everybody's cross-trained in soldier stuff, right? Fire weapons, whatever, right? But there's always, at least from my experience, there's always somebody who's a backup medic. There's a backup, whatever, right? But there's silly specializations, but you're a part of a team, right? So that tends to work. What doesn't work so well is if the only fight system or approach that we have is this uber fire kind of thing where the guy picks up his hands and we just drill him into the ground. Okay, well, that's kind of up in the air. Or all we ever have is a defensive approach where we retreats for some space, open him up, or it's all about evasion, passive locks, those kind of things. We may find ourselves in a situation where either that's not enough, right? Which is the point of for those of you who went through mod 2, right, the realm of the tactical warrior, most of that was in stretching this guy out, breaking his superior strength and whatnot by stretching him out, by using long range timing, distancing, and angling, right? Gave yourself time to find his openings, gave, use this distance to stretch him out, last second timing, those kind of things to break the advantage that he has, right? uh, this mod 3 that's coming up, I came up with a cool name for it, right? I'm calling it Dominate and Win, but it's the realm of the committed warrior. So in this case, the tactic is just the opposite, right? We don't have time to wait. Even backing up, right? To create that timing and distance or whatever, he's going to be in on you too quickly, right? You can't let him take the first shot. You can't, whatever, right? So the idea is, again, the strategic flexibility to give ourselves options. So uh, in the case where, like, the sky's the limit when it comes to types of attacks, right? Or, you know, my family's going to suffer if I misstep, lose my job, or go to jail, right? So the big premise in all of my programs is, how do you do this thing called protect yourself, protect other people, do your job, whatever, and stay out of jail, stay out of the ER, stay out of the morgue. Okay. And again, I get it that ego has its preferences, but this is not over just because we dropped the guy. All right. I'll give you, for instance, this is the thing that my guy Erskine and I were talking about today, yesterday. I don't know. My days are a blur anymore. So he sent me a video where there's this. This was a politically motivated attack, right? It's the inside of a store or something like that. So there's a couple people in there. One person is at the counter being taken care of by the clerk, and then there's a soldier in camo. They're in their uniform, right? And they're standing there, and this guy comes in, and almost immediately, right, he just drifts over behind the soldier. Who knows why he was there, right? It was silent CCTV. And next thing you know, there's a couple of stabs that happen. There's the knife at the throat. Somebody else comes in to kind of help out. But there's one or two bystanders that move in to get a hold of this guy, the knife wielding guy, right? And the soldier pulls away, and I don't know if they were a military cop or whatever. I don't even remember I think they were U.S., but they were NATO of some sort, right? And there's this. They draw their weapon, and they're fumbling around with trying to get it done, right? There's a full 9 seconds that go by between the drawing of the weapon and getting a round chambered and the safety's off. Right. And in that amount of time, the initial attacker breaks free of the people that were trying to hurt him and turns to come back at the soldier. I mean, he was targeted. Right. And luckily he got a round off in time, center mass. Right. The terminology, to not offend YouTube, was that the aggressor passed away as a result of his wounds. Okay. But for anybody who was paying attention to the final narration, you find out that the defender died later of his wounds as well. Okay. So again, right, and when the stabbing was happening and all that, there was right there was a main point to the video, and it was by somebody who does assessment of situations after the fact. Their big assessment was in, carrying around in the chamber, ready to go, if you're carrying for self-protection, right? And I know that policies and things can be different for different places, but as far as I'm concerned, if there's not a round in the chamber and it's not ready to go, it's not being carried for self-protection. If you need to carry out 2 or more moves to make that weapon functional, you're backing up, right? Same thing with number of safeties and all that kind of stuff, right? So, but what I sent back to Erskine to post wherever he's posting it, I can't remember. It might be our prepared defenders. We have a local group here, but lots of people from outside the area are members of it as well. And what I said was, I see 3 things. 1, there's a situational awareness problem, right? This guy is paying attention to what the clerk and the guy at the counter is doing, and he doesn't have this panoramic view of who's coming and going and whatnot. He's, it's the cardinal mistake that's made in the bodyguard world as well, right? There's a reason that we say a boring day is a good day in the bodyguard realm, okay? Because it's the day that you drop your guard and you are bored, right? When we say boring, I mean, we're on high alert, but nothing happened. Great. But the moment you fall into a routine where you're just not paying attention, that's the day that shit happens, right? So anyway, just wasn't paying attention. This guy got up behind him and just, went to town. I did not, I only gave Erskine 3 things to post because my first look at it was he was not trained or did not take defensive action that's any different than what anybody else would have taken untrained who was jumped from behind. It looked the same, right? I mean, he went for his sidearm. He was trying to shake this guy off, but he wasn't dealing with positioning and things like that, right? Other people, had it not been for the bystanders coming in that gave him time to kill the assailant before he went down later, he would have died right there on the floor, right? So that was a problem. Second problem was the weapon was not properly prepared to engage a hostile aggressor quickly, right? And the third lesson was you can win the fight and still lose ultimately from your wounds, right? So this is not a light topic, right? This is about warriorship, right? This is not about winning trophies and belts, right? The thing that was hammered into us way back in the day before it was softened for the masses was that this is the trophy that you get is to go home, right? That's what we're training for, right? It's not a colored belt. It's not a trophy. It's not a pat on the back, right? The prize you win, and different teachers said it different ways. One teacher said the prize you win is to get to go home and tuck your kids into bed, right? In my case, at this age, right, it's my grandson. Read him a story, tuck him into bed, right? He doesn't have to know, but he doesn't care, right? How you got home, just that you're there to read him that bedtime story and to put him to bed, right? Kiss him goodnight. Tell him, sweet dreams. Okay. Doesn't care how many people's ass you kicked, right? How you did it, what style you used, whatever. It's just, right. But I get it. Not everybody's looking for that kind of thing, which is, it was easy to see how the training over the years just shifted away from a balance between life mastery and personal development and the ninja operating, primarily on stealth and the taijutsu being done in a way where he can't see how you're doing what you're doing, and flanking him and using unseen points and different skills like that, to looking pretty much like every other martial art, to becoming just another martial arts option among martial arts options, right? Which it was disconcerting. It was sad to watch, but at the same time, there's a reason that we're doing what we're doing, and everybody else can do their thing, right? Um, because again, agenda, right? They want to know that they have the best style. They want to know that they have, the best techniques and all that, which always points to this one hit wonder kind of thing, right? When I first started in this training, when we talked about the 5 elements, which a lot of people think are bullshit, I don't care. But when we talked about this earth element of holding your ground, which is a strategic option, right? We equated that with wrestling, or with almost like a sumo kind of approach, if we're going to be thinking about it like a martial art. But it's not. It wasn't just that way. It was also, the dad standing there with his hands on his hips, right? The chest is wide open and the voice is deep, and just, very, very straightforward, very low tone kind of thing. Like, what do you think you're doing? Right? It wasn't, what do you think you're doing? Sit down. It wasn't that kind of thing. It was just a very, I don't know what you think you're doing, but you need to have a seat. We need to have a conversation. It's very different, right? It's, the police officer saying, sir, step back, right? Just wait right there. Okay. Just wait right there. I'm having a conversation right here. Sir, stay right there. It's very different, right? If the inflection in the voice goes up, if the body language is more herky jerky, if there's condescending speech thrown in there, if there's kind of a broken hesitancy to the voice, not only is that a tell about the state that the person is in, but they're going to get less compliance from somebody, right? There's this element of command, right? Anyway, I'll get back to those in a minute, right? But while I do believe that, there are times when, you want to be a specialist, right? But even so, right? Bruce Lee talked about this. You go through an entire fight system. You're going to be a specialist, right? I'm going to specialize in, my specialty is Goju Karate. My specialty is American Taekwondo. My specialty is whatever, right? Sambo, pick something, right? People go through all of these techniques. They go through all of the training, and they end up settling on a couple of punches, a couple of kicks, wrist lock, whatever. So they haven't really mastered that whole thing either, right? They were given a whole toolbox, and they go, you know what? Really, I need a flathead screwdriver. I need a Phillips screwdriver. I need a pair of pliers. I need a hammer. And, oh yeah, roll of duct tape. Don't forget the duct tape. You know what? You can throw a flashlight in there too. That'll be fine. Right. And then, you've got this stuff, and okay, great. Right. As long as, what's that old saying? If all you have is a hammer, every problem's a nail, or it better be, right? Good luck fixing a cracked pane of glass in a window if all you have is a hammer, right? I mean, you can open it up, but putting that new pane of glass back in there might be a problem, right? So the idea where that came from, right? Again, pushing a single agenda, right? But it misses the point that, okay, I need a screwdriver. I can see that. I need a screwdriver. I need a Phillips head screwdriver, right? Now, I am by no means a Mr. Fix-It. James is. I'm not, right? So James is like bobbing his head back and forth, right? Neener. I don't know if that's what it is. He's muted. But even I've learned that screwdrivers come with different blade sizes, because screws come in different sizes. And if you match, you got a little bit of variance, but if you match the wrong blade size to the slits, right, in the screw head, right, whether it's a straight or it's a Phillips, the plus sign one, for those of you who are not sure about this, right, if the screw's too small for the screwdriver blade that I have, it won't even go in there to do the work, right? If the screwdriver blade that I have is too small, it'll go right in the middle of that plus sign and you could spin it around and nothing's going to happen. If it's somewhere in the middle, you could strip out that thing, right? So again, what's the variance, right? Which is why we buy socket sets, we buy screwdriver sets, we buy wrench sets, because the problem comes in different forms. So why would we not do this from a self-protection perspective, right? What if, um, you know, the situation dictates a certain thing and that's not my forte? Well, you can't, well, you can try to walk away from it, but what's going to happen, right? If my one trick pony style approach isn't suited to that, what's going to happen? One of two things. I'm the guy with the hammer and I'm going to try to make this situation a nail when really what I need is a screw gun or I need a welding setup or whatever, right? I'm going to try to make it work. It's not that I can't, but remember those three attackers. Okay. Just because you won doesn't mean you don't end up in prison trying to keep your backside safe from the guys in the shower. Right. But if I need something and I don't have it, what's going to end up happening is I'm going to end up fighting and trying to defend myself or whoever it is that I'm trying to protect the same way everybody else would. Because the tools that I brought to the repair job, wrong tools. So now I'm running around like everybody else trying to find what'll work. Okay. That's the best analogy I can come up with at the moment, but that's the idea. Okay. So what I want to do is take a walk around the mandala and take a look at the strategic flexibility that's already built in. We'll also talk about a core principle. It's described differently across different lineages, but it's the same. Okay, it's the same. I've been doing a lot of extra research these days, and kind of keeping my ear tuned to lessons that have come out of even non-Bujinkan traditional schools, and finding out that right the stuff is in there. These warriors that were survivors had to figure this stuff out, right? Where a lot of warriors that they grew up in a system, kind of like Oryomo Takagi, right? The founder or ascribed founder of the Takagi Yoshimyu, one of the 9 schools in the Bujinkan. He was an ascribed master. He was already this master warrior from a lineage. What was it now? Takagi Yoshin, 14 generations back, something like that, right? I don't count the numbers. Anyway, then when he got his ass handed to him by this fighter from a different school and actually a more modern approach, people have a hard time thinking about the fact that, traditionally, centuries ago, right? Yeah, well, the people that lived then, that was modern times for them. Right. And so he got his ass handed to him by somebody. But either way, people that go through systems like that will often look at other systems to see, not to study the system like they're going to learn too, but to see what that system has that they can use, that they can integrate into what they already have. We just kind of luck out because we have these 9 schools that Hatsumi Sensei had Soke shipped to, right? But meanwhile, he had how many other ones that he didn't have Soke shipped to? He just had Menkyo Kaiden, right? So how many influences do we have within the Bujinkan outside of the 9, right? Ito-ryu, Musashi-ryu, Manriki school, all kinds of things, right? So we just kind of luck out because these schools have already done that kind of integration, purification kind of thing across the board. Now people just say, I study Bujinkan, Interesting. Okay. What does that mean? Okay. It's kind of like define a woman. Anyway, all right. Before I step on people's peepees, we'll keep moving. James, who's on? Who do I need to say hello to? Take a little break here. Questions, comments, complaints. So I'd say you don't understand. Yeah. Anyway.
We got Carl, Jared,
Jared. Yeah. Awesome.
Trinity.
Carl signed on early.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't you say you saw Carl early? Okay. You know that old Japanese saying, right? To be early is to be on time. To be on time is to be late, and to be late is to be fired or ostracized. Either one works, right? Awesome. Trinity's on. Awesome.
Dave Fletch,
The
Julia.
regular rogues gallery. Julia, excellent. I'm sure Julia's already shared it across 5 different networks.
And then
She's like my PR person.
Nick Tomlinson had a comment. He said, I attended a self-defense class a few months ago taught by an experienced bouncer, and the whole thing was based on punching the chest. He used it a lot and also was to condition people to be able to receive a blow and not be overcome by trauma. I was broken for days after it. Some of those attacks to the kimon and such can be very effective.
Can be. Yeah, which is why in the Koto-yu we've got 42 of them, right? The more you know, the greater chances of success, right? The more options you have, the greater chances of success. Okay? And that's a huge thing, right? Well, how do you master all that? Well, see, I think people have a different definition of mastery. Okay? So you don't need to be a master. You just need to be committed and effective. Okay? What you need to master is things like assessment skills, targeting, bite to your to the technique, whatever it happens to be, and whatnot. Know what you have, and take that thing. Not right, and not like I got to do it a certain way. Okay, how about if you let him lead the dance, and go there? Now, sometimes, like as in our mod 3. And again, I'm going to explain why the modules look one way, but in the black belt levels, things tend to look a little bit differently. And there's all this conflict. Like, that's not the way they teach in Japan. I don't care. I go to Japan too, right? They know what I'm doing, right? So, but there's a lot of skills that you got to be careful, because if the focus is always just on physical technique and physical prowess, right, then what ends up happening is only the most intuitive are going to, even if they can't put it into words, figure out, or what they're going to do is develop their own tactics and strategies, right? Just because they learn the techniques doesn't mean they understand the tactical approaches or the strategic thinking that was passed down hand in hand, right? Because what was passed around from the mid 80s, mid to late 80s onward were these damn kata lists, right? That's the densho. Meanwhile, back in Mastery Land, right, there's a whole set of makimono, right? The scrolls where the philosophy, all the stuff that makes those techniques not only work, but makes them unique and a secret, right, to that given lineage, is in a whole different set of books, right? Just because you can do the step by step doesn't mean that you understand how to set this person up and control the bubble so that he can't see you do the technique when you do it. It's just it's a huge thing. But you're absolutely right. Punch to the chest, make sure you're exhaling, right? But either way, you got to be really, really, really careful with punches to the chest, especially to the sternum, because you can induce an arrhythmia to the heart and kill somebody. So I appreciate that everybody has their move, their signature move, right? But if you kill somebody, And the situation was not, from a use of force, from a self-defense doctrine, kind of the litmus test, right? Going to jail for involuntary manslaughter, voluntary manslaughter, attempted murder, or whatever. Not a cool thing. Okay. So I'm glad that you learned that those things work, but man, you got to be really, really careful with those things. Just like too hard of a shot to the uko, right? This is a primary shot, right? In our kihon gata, ichimonji no kata, right? This uko, right, side of the neck, right here. For those of you listening audio only, I'm right in the middle of the neck, middle of the carotid pouch, right? You're at what, T, somewhere between T2 and T4, right? That's a kill shot. This is not shit to be messing around with, right? That's a kill shot. Okay. The carotid pouch, just not just within the carotid pouch, but along the whole side over here. Get a Gray's Anatomy, or like the guys at the dojo know that I have like the illustrated versions so as to not have certain people pass out in class. And then other ones that are like me, I've got this whole medical anatomy book that it's cadavers, right? So I have to be careful who I open that book to, because people get faint pretty quickly. But there are these bundles and whatnot that, between nerves and vascular, arterial kind of stuff and whatnot, you're seriously, bashing those things up against the transverse processes of the vertebrae, right? And look it up. I'm not, these little protrusions, right? But at the same time, this is the smallest part of the spine, and striking laterally there can get the vertebrae to shift laterally, right? And there's a spinal cord. Your primary electrical cable runs down through that thing. And if you cause those things to scissor, right, you can snip the spinal cord. Okay. Now, while that may sound cool, right, last thing you need to do is create a problem for a training partner where they're now a paraplegic, quadriplegic, or they're dead, right? So, and again, that brings into a use of force kind of thing, because in today's world, we don't live in an area, or we don't live in an era where we're being called out to war all the time. Okay. So I have been a soldier through training with this stuff. I have been a law enforcement officer through training with this stuff. I've been a personal security professional, a bodyguard, whatever. Okay. I've also protected family members, whatever. This point in my life, it's more life challenges and things like that. But, if we're looking at this stuff with the wrong perspective, or a single-minded one-trick pony perspective, we could find ourselves in a serious freaking, sling kind of situation, because the techniques were designed during the Sengoku Jidai Warring States period, when it was kill or be killed. Okay. There was no use of force. And if there was, it was not the same. Okay. So even the Kihon, right? Especially Ichimonji no Kata, Hicho no Kata, all these things, right? The whole idea is right. And I get it. People approach it, well, that's a restraint, that's a throw, yeah, okay. What happens after he's down, right? If you take a look, anybody that knows the at least the Shoden no Maki kata, so the first, it's not first level, it's high level. Show is high in this case, right? But the techniques on the first level scroll of the Kotoryu, okay? If you look at them from the perspective of at least one sword in your obi, whether or not you're using the sword itself to do the uke nagashi, the end position of all the kata on that first level are in a position where you can draw your sword and cut him. After that last move, right, you can finish him. Okay. So this is not a simple thing, right? And we have to be careful, right, with again, Hatsumi Sensei, a bunch of years ago, decades ago, started telling people soft training, right? Don't hurt your partner. Okay. They didn't mean turn your shit to mush, right? What they meant was a properly executed technique hurts, whether you're doing it fast or you're doing it slow. So, right? Don't try to hurt your partner. These are killing techniques. These are crippling and maiming techniques, right? So again, we need to be cautious. Anyway, anybody else on before I jump into this second phase and we go?
No, that was it.
Okay, cool. All right. So when I'm talking about strategic flexibility, right, this all goes back to many things that are written across the different lineages, right? Whether we're talking Takagi Yoshin, Shinden Fudo Ryu, Gyoko Ryu, whatever. I'm just going to pull the primary one from Gyoko Ryu, but just know that these things are in the different lineages in some fashion, okay? And that is this 3-in-1 principle or 1-in-3 principle. The 1-in-3 principle is that you should be able to find the unifying principle, the principle that is being used to control the situation, regardless of what the physical techniques look like. And you should be able to see there's this principle, right? Like the Omote Gyaku principle. The Omote Gyaku principle is the principle of taking somebody equally or evenly off of both of their heels at the same time so that their body gets confused and doesn't know which foot to step with. Okay. And so it's how to take somebody down backwards. Okay. Just a group of us. I don't know if this is officially in the scrolls or not, but we call this the Omote Gyaku principle because you're initiated. The first Torite Gata you're taught in the modern iteration of the Kyonapo is Omote Gyaku, right? And so Omote Gyaku is not just a wrist reversal. Yes, it's the name of a technique, but it's what you're doing to their body, right? What you're doing to them, okay? We don't have a foot and toes behind us to do what they do in front of us to keep us from being taken off balance. So Omote Gyaku is the obvious frontal. It's the way, the easiest way to take somebody off balance. Okay. Learn this. Okay. Stop worrying about whether the wrist is twisting or they feel pain or whatever. Are you taking them off balance? Right. Are you being able to take them down? But okay, if we switch that into a principle and we understand that, okay, this is taking them off their heels equally, then Osotonage, right? The rear hip throw uses Omote Gyaku principle. Musha Dori, Onikudaki, those kind of things. They use the Muso Dori principle, right? If everything is correct and the alignment on the body with the arms to the torso and whatnot is correct, then our litmus test for whether or not we have this correctly, or he's going to be able to disengage or slip whatever we have and come around and attack us, is whether or not he's going off his heels. And you'll know whether that happens or not because his body will lock up, right? Because he's fighting gravity, not you, right? His body is trying to not fall down. Okay. That's a huge litmus test. And that's something we're going to be taking a look at in this next program, where this fire element, this intercepting kind of thing, is not always just this big extreme thing. I'll talk about that here in a minute, where we're just taking the fight to them. It's also paying attention during the delivery of your technique, looking for that moment that you can connect with, right? The fire realm on the mandala is also about connection, right? And so if I'm moving in to do a Musodori, Onikudaki, something like that, right? And I'm moving in, and I can torque on his arm at any point, but that doesn't make it right. Okay, if he's over flexible, whatever. But there will come a point, right? If I know what I'm looking for, okay, and I'm not doing it left brain. Once you can do this by feel, there will come a moment in the technique where his body will lock up. It'll right? And you'll know what that feels like and how it's different from muscular resistance. It's that moral response that we human beings have when we slip and the body tries to catch itself. There's a sense of stiffness that happens because the brain's trying to keep everything in one place so that it can just very quickly move something to fix itself, right? So I'm feeling for that moment. And in that moment, that is when I want to torque things. Okay. This is not something you practice at speed with your partner. You really got to go slowly. And you just know that, right? You just fire a little bit of muscle to teach your system that that's what, because under the adrenal response, you're not going to have a problem putting in extra speed and extra strength, right? You need to know the timing, right? So part of that fire element of go now, right, is not just go now and go whoop his ass. It's that go now. This is when you torque the joint. This is when you apply that pressure, right? This is when, like in an uke nagash, right? And I'm moving in with ichimonji no kata or anything like that, right? There's something I do in there that throws his arm or does the control. Each uke nagash is a little bit different that causes this locking up, that where the body's trying to catch balance. And in that instant, it's like putting him in a vice and locking him down. And if you can get your strike to land at that moment, there will be no flinch response where he starts to pull away from it. There will be no him evading it, shifting or whatever, because he's not fighting you in that moment. He's fighting balance. He's fighting gravity, right? He's having there's not even a subconscious. It's an unconscious reflex to stabilize the body, right? To keep it from falling down. 90% of the body's effort goes to saving itself. There's little to nothing left to stop your shot from happening. But the bigger thing is that all of your energy goes into that target. Right? He locks himself down for the delivery of that shot. He doesn't mean to, right? But that's my perspective, right? So in that moment, I have to be ready to go, right? But I'm ready to go because I can feel it happening. And then if it slips, no big deal, right? Okay, I'm going to be off to the next thing. But as a technique starts to unfold, what does it feel like when it's really happening? What does it feel like as it's moving to that point where you can do the takedown or you can do that shot? What does that feel like? Because there will be a moment. Trey Sensei calls this best time, right? There is a best time for, if we're doing a hard uke nagash, one of these kotoryu or togakure counter strikes, right? Or even the gyokoryu swatting counter strike kind of idea, right? There is a best time to land. There's also a best target. There are secondaries, right? And there are things that you will do because that's what you have. But there's an ideal, the dragon realm, and there's the rough and raw, the tiger realm. Both deserve training, right? Because one, I have to have a lot of control in the situation. The other one, I'll take what I can get, and he's going to take what I'm going to give him. Right? It's a very different kind of perspective, right? Very different outcome. Anyway, but there's this, that's the unifying thing, right? That's not the principle. The principle is the 3-in-1. Okay. 3-in-1 is there are these three aspects that are going on. And there's this recurring theme of threes. And the way this is kind of approached, and not to me, since I did a lesson on this a long, long time ago, and I just covered this in a recent episode. Nobody has no choice. Nobody has zero options or whatever, right? If you have zero options, you're dead, right? No, only dead people have zero options, right? If I only have one, then I'm a slave. A lot of you guys get this, right? But within like Takagi Yoshinryu, right? There's the idea of locking 3 lines of balance or catching and controlling 3 lines of balance at the same time. And if not in the same instant, 1, 2, 3, very quickly, right? within Kukishinden, right? We're doing sword stuff, right? Every time I engage him with my weapon, he gets tagged 3 times. Okay. And now that points to alignment and angling and all that, so that I'm not having to redirect one and come back. And right, there's a concept of sanuch, right? Sanuch. We're going to be covering that during this thing coming up. Sanuch has two iterations. One is very much like the thing I just described with the sword. Okay. Every time I engage with him, he gets nailed 3 times. Okay. And it could be different fist, feet, knees, whatever, different targets or whatever. But what should be happening is, if my taijutsu is correct and my alignment is correct, the ending of one strike sets up the next. So I'm not having to like hit, retract, hit again, that kind of thing. So that's one iteration. Another iteration is 3 shots to the same target. Okay. Now we could do like the guy with the knife or the jackhammer guy, and we hit, we withdraw and hit again and hit again. But that presumes that we have the time, or we need that amount of movement to generate power, right? Which kind of runs in contradiction to Nippo Taijutsu. But what we're doing here is, especially from the Gyokuryu's perspective, we don't need to break him with the first one. The first one sets up the next one to the next one. So what you're doing is adding injury to injury, right? I mean, you can call it insult to injury, but it's injury to injury. So what that requires, and again, coming up in the new program, is understanding our fist from a different level. So we'll be going through the 16 fist and all that kind of stuff. But because the way our modules are laid out, everybody gets a couple of fists in each one. By the time you get to mod 3, now you get the full list. And then moving forward after that, you learn different ways to use each one. So again, every fist is not a one-trick pony. Every throw is not a one-trick pony. Whatever, okay? So let's say that my 3 shots, it's not about hitting him. It's about hitting a specific target. So in this case, it's Butsumetsu, right? So Butsumetsu, the day the Buddha died, right? I'm going to borrow the Gyoko version of it, because Koto, there's another version as well, that it's the whole like side, right? There's a whole section. In this case, it's the floating rib, right? Just off the side to the front and below the rib cage, you're going to hit the floating rib, because when I hit that, it creates a muscular response, that's this flinch response in the torso, that causes that whole band of muscle around the diaphragm to lock up, because you're at the bottom of the rib cage. There is no structural protection to help the organs below that. So that rib flexes because it's another one of the key protective gates to the body, that when it's hit or it's hurt and pain happens or it's threatened, the body will close down. It'll fold. It'll, do these things, right? So if I can trigger that, it causes that girdle to fire up and immobilizes it all the way to having, it shortens the reach on his limbs and all kinds of stuff. It's really, really cool. But if I hit it a little bit, right, the body flexes. And so the body comes in, it brings the limbs in for that microsecond to protect that point, not to hit me, right? But he's going to recover and go to hit me again. But if I hit it again, I didn't just hit the floating rib again, I hit an injured spot again, which compounds the damage. And then I'm going to hit the same spot again. So what we work on is flexibility within the fist, but also looking at the distance and the range that a fist takes up. And I'm not talking about going from shoulder to punching. I'm talking about if I use a Shikan-ken, and I apologize to those of you who are on audio only, but I've got a bunch of these videos that are out. And again, if you sign up for the program, you'll really see it. Anyway, but for those of you who are on video, right? Shikanken takes up a certain distance, okay? Right? We know this, okay? But it's not about, at this point, it's not about just knowing what part of the fist to hit with. It's knowing where the other parts, the other digits are, okay? So I want you to see something. And again, I apologize to you, those of you on audio only. You can go over onto the YouTube channel, go to the live tab, and find this same episode, and then find us at, where the hell's my timing? Where are we, James? An hour 21 and change, right? So from here, right, I want you to see something. I'm going to leave my four fingers and my four fingers in the same spot, right? And I'm going to extend my thumb. See how my thumb doesn't go past the striking surface of a Shikanken? But if I strike, right, that's going to create a little bit of space because of the strike, right? And I'm not talking about plowing into the guy. I'm talking about just bumping him. He's going to come away from that a little bit, and then I can collapse my fingers as I dropped forward, right? I can just bring my fingers back to me and project my thumb forward as I fall forward on the same point. So I can do Shikanken, Boshiken, and I didn't have to wind up. My Boshiken is coming from way back here, so it will generate speed, right? I've already done whatever with the Shikanken. 1, 2. And then from right here, because he bounced off of that, I can fall forward, not fall, but you get the idea, right? And fold my forearm away so that an elbow drops on the same point. And you can play around with your different strikes this way so that it's easier and you can do it quickly because you've eliminated wind up. Wind up is a part of the gono-sen, right? The what we call the water response, this big haul off wind up kind of thing, right? We want to be like a crossbow that's already loaded, and all we have to do is pull the trigger, okay? Or a pistol or whatever, right? We don't have to wind up. We don't have to. It's not like a baseball bat. I hit him, and then I got to wind up to hit him again, okay? That's what we might call a water response, where there's this big haul off to create power to come back in. But I could be like a machine gun, right? 1, 2, 3. I can drop the next fist in, the next fist in, the next fist in, because I understand what each one needs and what each one creates for space. And instead of winding up, I just change my hand into a different fist that falls into that same spot and hits that same target. So I don't need the haul off. And this is extremely helpful for people that are smaller, thinner, that don't have that muscle mass to haul off, or somebody that's ill, or they're older, right? Or they've got injuries, right? And they don't have the quick body movement anymore, right? Again, they're older, they're injured, whatever, right? So now, because speed is based on, when we think of speed, most people think of time. Okay, great. But the speed at this level is based on distance, because the distance between point A and point B, the fist and the target, right? There's only one way to cross that distance, and that is, right, the distance, the time it takes to travel from one to the other, right, is really dependent on the speed that I throw the fist. But it's not just dependent on that. The longer the distance, no matter how fast you go, takes a longer time to get there, no matter how fast you are. I mean, you can close the distance really fast, but the distance puts a cap on that, right? One of the lessons that Tatsumi Sensei had in the instructor manual, which was originally titled Togakure Ryu Ninpo, or Ninpo Taijutsu, something like that, right? It's the Tenshi Jinryaku no Maki, the book of heaven, earth, and mankind. In the section on striking, the way to deliver faster strikes is to walk the fist as close to the target as possible before you deliver the strike. But that's for the first one, right? You can literally machine gun these things and not have to do what most people do, which is to hit, retract, hit, retract, hit, retract, or come in with multiple strikes on both sides, okay? Which is harder if you're in a profiled position, which is, it's almost sacrosanct, right? I mean, it's almost the official way to do things in Nimpo Taijutsu, because 70% of our techniques are from a profiled position to make it easy for us to reach him, difficult for him to reach us, right? But how do I use both fists for speed shots if one is 4 times the distance away than the other one, right? Well, if folks stick around long enough, they learn the lessons, or they have a teacher that opens things up, they can get it. Otherwise, if you're only looking at the techniques, then what are we doing? Well, we're comparing techniques from this system with techniques from those guys over there, and because I need to be faster, well, then I must have to fight like them. No, you need to study what you're doing better to understand how this system throws faster shots, right? And why a lead in this system is not the same as a jab in another system. Can you jab? Sure. But it's a diminishing of power at the end point, not throwing the arm differently, right? And so, people need to understand this art was the original mixed martial art. So stop trying to fucking turn it into a mixed martial art because you're trying to spackle gaps. Not you, right? They keep trying to spackle gaps or spackle cracks that don't exist. Okay. And that goes for, situational control as well, right? We have all these different kami, right? People tend to just take up arbitrary kami because, well, that's my favorite, or I understand that one, or that's the official one. No, we have wide open ones that you're square and open forward, right? We have ones. There's a difference between a standard jumonji and a hira jumonji, right? Or a hicho jumonji, right? We know those, yes. Okay. A seigan or ichimonji jumonji, right? A reclining jumonji as opposed to a forward. I'm going to use the term leaning, but it's not. It's not correct, right? A leaning or a centered, right? All kami have a reclining position. They all have a forward leaning or inclined position, and they all have a centered neutral position, right? It's just, again, there's the flexibility, right? Strategic flexibility. But strategy points to outcome. What is the outcome that I need from this? Right? The fighter will say, I just need to whoop his ass. I just need to be the winner. Okay. The defender, the self-defense person tends to say, look, I just need enough to end this so I can get out. Right. The evader will say, look, I just need to keep him from hitting me. Okay. But what's the situation? What do you need in that situation? Because if I have my grandson in tow, I can promise you my strategic response is likely to be different than it's going to be if I'm by myself, regardless of whether the guy pulls a weapon or whatever. It's going to be different, right? Because it has to be, right? Am I holding him? Is he clutching my leg because he's terrified and I have to worry about where I'm stepping, so as to not step on him, break something that pierces something else, or I trip and fall on him. Very different, right? But then again, if this were, what this art gives us is lots of options. But if this were easy, you probably wouldn't be attracted to it. Okay? Anyway, so the strategic flexibility, right, really comes down to, again, we're just going to walk around the mandala. In the earth realm, what we have is holding our ground. Okay. That could be physically, right? But it could also be in an argument too. But it's not really an argument if you're in this earth mode, holding your ground, and somebody's yelling and screaming and whatnot. It's only an argument if you're throwing a counterpoint at the same time. If you're just standing there waiting for them to be done, that's an option. You're not listening to me. I am listening. Are you finished? You don't care. I do care. But at what point in our relationship did me kowtowing to everything that you wanted and not having choice in anything be a key point in whether or not I love you? See, this is not an argument. I'm asking them questions. Okay. They have to justify their position, right? This is fudoshin. This is not caring. Could be, but on the mandala, there's also not enough and falling short in a given area, and there's also being too extreme. Okay, you don't care. You're right. Have a nice day. Okay. As a matter of fact, I don't care so much. You can keep all the shit that we had together. Have a nice day. Okay, that's a little extreme, right? But there's also the, my rules, my ball, or my ball, my rules. It's the little tyrant, right? So there's this stuff all the way around the mandala. What I'm just going to go around here quickly and take a look at the way the modules are set up compared to advanced, intermediate, and the advanced levels, right? So again, Earth is just holding your ground. Could be, again, physically, mentally, emotionally, whatever, okay? But I don't feel a need to move. This is not stubbornness, which is negative water, right? This it's kind of between the two, but I'm not moving because of the principle of the thing. Not bothered. Emotionally, I'm not stirred. So whenever you're ready, we can get on with solving the problem. Okay? So in the water realm, what we have is adaptability. What we have is a flexibility, but what it is, and I'm going to use the word defensiveness, but what we need in this realm is we need time, right? And distance creates time. So what I'm doing, either because emotionally I need time to sort things out, right? Or strategically, I'm going to move and I'm going to create distance, right? To make him miss a couple of times. So he shows his hand. He shows me what his fight style is. He shows me how he throws punches, how he throws kicks. And now I know what to stay away from and what opens up when he throws something. So now I know what angle to move to, right? But I can also use that distance to, against somebody who's bigger and stronger. I don't want this guy touching me, right? I don't want, in the earth realm, I know I've got the strong position. I might be willing to take a shot or two. Because this person, based on their build, based on their scattered energy or whatever, is it going to hurt because they hit nerve endings? Yeah. Are they able to break me? No. Right? So I'm willing to take those shots. This is not the guy who goes, go ahead, punch me in the gut. It's okay. Right? It's not that. Okay. But I'm just, you can't hurt me. So, I'm going to let you cook off some steam. In the water realm, if you touch me, I'm probably going to break, right? It's just that nature. You have a weapon or your size, your power, whatever, right? So I need to neutralize that by creating more distance that you have to cover, okay? That gives me more time. That gives me more, it gives me the ability to break that strength by stretching you out, right? But in the fire realm, our mod 3, right, level 3, it's just the opposite, right? I can't let you touch me, but maybe I can't back up, or maybe the exit's on the other side of you. My escape route is on the other side of you. I have no choice. Okay. Again, we will touch on the things with the techniques, but I'll talk about that in a minute, right? But in this case, I need to intercept you. I need to preempt things, and I need to intercept before you get into full steam. Okay. So where the water realm is in other terminology is gono-sen, right? Gono-sen is I initiate my movement. Sen here means to initiate, right? Not align or other words, right? It means when you initiate your movement. So I initiate my movement upon his attack, which means I'm late, right? The attack is already coming. I need to move, right? I need to move so I can absorb that. I need to move so I can deal with it, whatever. In Go no Sen, you're late. Okay. In Sen no Sen, this fire realm kind of thing, right? In this case, I initiate my movement upon his intent to attack. So I don't attack first. It looks like it to somebody who doesn't understand what they're looking at. It looks like, well, you punched him first. He wasn't doing anything. Yeah, no. Because if I punch first and he's not initiating mentally and emotionally, and the body's starting to get into motion, doesn't mean the arm's flying, doesn't mean the foot's coming, doesn't mean a knife is coming. It means that internally he's committed and the attack is coming, right? If I move too soon, he will defend because he wasn't in process. Okay? This requires somebody to be really tuned in to their attacker. You need to recognize this is a relationship, and I'm tuned in. This is not me doing my shit and him doing him. You do you, I'll do me. No, it's not that. We're not just slinging shit around. I'm tuned in, right? And so if I'm late, obviously that's why we teach that first, right? Get the hell out of the way, right? But if I can meet him in the moment when he decides to go, you will know when you're right, because everybody else will see you throw the first shot, but his is trailing just behind that. And when you tag him, he can't avoid. He can't. There's no flinch response because you intercepted it. You intercepted between his intent to go and his physical body moving. I know that sounds woo-woo, but it's the way it is. Okay. If you are too soon, he'll flinch. He'll move because he wasn't in attack mode. He was in observation mode or he was in receiving mode. And this is the Gyoko to you as well. Each of the kamae, each of the Sanden kamae, they're primary. Again, as you move up, you can adjust these things. But Ichimonji is used for observation, Hicho is used for delivering, and Jumonji is used for receiving. Okay? I know, in Mod 1, we taught them differently. It's okay. Okay? As my Mikyo teacher used to always say, the universe is grand enough to contain all apparent contradictions, because they're only a contradiction if you're only coming at things from one perspective. Okay? So, again, either way, right? So, but we have these, you're getting him first. Okay? So, avoiding, right? Defending, pulling back, getting him, holding your ground, whatever. And then in the wind realm, it's this tricky evasion, right? You're always on the move kind of thing. And so it's hard to pin you down, that kind of thing. It's the opposite of, right? All these things are opposites, right? Wind is opposite earth. Earth is opposite wind. Fire is opposite water. Water is opposite fire. It's the same thing, right? They're just these opposites, right? So, and then what is void? Well, void is the ability to think and communicate. So that includes de-escalation. It includes knowing where to be. But in the modules, we tend to focus on the extreme, holding your ground. I'm going to use leverage and strength to shut you down. Water, I'm using this long-range defensive angling, stretch you out, find the opening, come back in, tag you where you're most vulnerable. Fire, I'm going to move in, intercept you, shut things down, right? Just get it over quickly. Wind, I'm going to encircle you, trap, right? Take you down that way. I'm going to come in, flanking maneuvers, right? But life's not so cut and dry. So in Mod 5, going into the black belt levels, they start to have more of a sense of these other things, which is why in the modules, as you get the primary, we start to touch on these other things so that you're kind of prepared for them when you get into Mod 5 and going into Shodan. So when we say that where you're closer to void, right? You're less extreme. What we mean then is, like, now you've got, in your, let's say you're doing Earth, right? But you're also very adaptive, right? Maybe I am holding my ground, but something changes and I can shift into the one I need, right? You're able to shift into and out of these. or you recognize that, he came at you and you were feeling defensive, so you opted for either a wind response, hira, or a water response, ichimonji, seigan, something like that, and you parry or you counter strike, and you realize that you have this moment, and you go fire, right? I'm in there, right? I'm not using the same timing, the same whatever, right? But this is not unusual. This is not human. How many emotions did you go through, or how many states did you go through today? Right? You might have been irritated at 10:10, and by 10:15, you were all excited about something. And then by 10:30, 11 o'clock, noon, whatever, you were feeling kind of like here because you had lunch or whatever, or somebody gave you something to think about, and that kind of slowed you down. And now there's not really an emotional response going on. You're just kind of thinking through this problem, right? And then, who knows, 2:35, somebody pissed you off, and now you're in this fire mode, right? Motherfucker. That kind of thing, right? We shift. This is life, right? And our training is like that. But every one of these things that I just laid out is a strategic option. It's a way to handle the situation that could be dictated in one of, I think in Whiteboard Wednesday, I covered like 5. It could be determined based on your feelings about the situation. And so your body's just naturally doing a certain thing. You pick up on that and go, I know how to operate under this state. It could be based on his feelings. It could be based on your agenda, right? My Leos, look, I need this guy face down so I can get him into cuffs. End of story. Doesn't matter how I feel, right? So there is a strategic outcome that I need. Okay. Could be based on his approach. Call it fight style, right? So if I understand, because there's another way we could go around the mandala and label all the elements based on the way certain people punch or their attack style, right? And so I already gave you the answer, right? Each one is opposites, okay? So there's a primary and secondary answer to each of those modes or elements as this guy's fight style, right? So I picked one because it's the answer, right? It's the easiest way and the best strategic way to shut down somebody that's using that particular style, right? What else? Could be environment, could be job, could be whatever, right? So going back to the 3, right? The idea is that we don't approach freedom, right? The more options we have in any given situation, the greater our chances of success, given that we have decent assessment or discernment skills and we know how to match up the tools in the toolbox with the problem we need to fix. Okay. But the greater number of options, right? The scrolls across all these lineages where we're talking about 3-in-1, 3 lines of balance, there's this 3 thing that runs across, right? And even in other sciences, right? Science of success and all that, you increase your chances of success only at the point where you have 3 or more options in that given moment. Now, you got to be careful with the average person, because if you give them more than 3 options, right? And even when I'm enrolling people, right, I give somebody 3 options for enrollment, because if I only give them 1, they feel trapped, and I'm going to get more often than not, I'm going to get I have to think about it. Okay, they feel pressured, right? This is it. This is all you have. If I give them 2 options, there still might not be enough, right? I have to pick this or I have to pick this. The moment I give them 3 options, right? This is the full option. This is the budget option or the bare bones option. This is the mid kind of thing, right? 8 out of 10 people pick one. 20% of the time we have to think about it or whatever. We were only in for information. But 80% of the time, somebody picks one. Now, if I pick this one, I can always upgrade. Yes. Okay. What do you recommend? Well, okay, we've already assessed your goals. Based on your goals, I would recommend here. I outlined the top choice, but always as a comparison, because I know that most people will bite off more than they can chew. And I always tell people, I'm not here to enroll you in the top program, because I need to assess you more as a student before I know whether or not you're cut out for that program. Okay. Psychologically speaking, what do people want most? What do they want most, James? What they can't have. Okay. But that's not why I do it. I do it because I'm not signing up somebody for a black belt program, knowing that chances are the first opportunity or the first statistical point that they're going to drop off, or that there's a really good chance of them dropping off, is at 100 days out. After that, if they don't drop off at 100 days, the next drop-off point is between 4 and 11 months. Okay? They don't drop off between that 4 and 11 months. I call that sticky booger syndrome, and they're going to be around unless there's a major life issue that pops up. They're going to be around for a long time. Okay? And that's not that keeps me from having to guess. That makes us put certain systems and things in place for student service early on, right? Make sure they're feeling comfortable, make sure they're getting what they need, that kind of stuff, right? Not pandering to people, but I know where these things are, right? And it also helps me separate out the hobbyist from the recreationalist for people who want this as a life empowering thing. It's very different. Right? That's for something else. So anyway, but as we move up, each of these options will have, there'll be more of these things in them. If I could be in a doko instead of an ichimonji, and I'm not so extreme defensive, right? Because doko is one of those lukewarm kind of things where my front hand is saying, hey, stay back, and my backhand is saying, if you come in here, I got something for you. So is that water or is that fire? Well, it depends. The leading side of me is communicating one way, but the rear side of me is letting them know, if you don't choose option A, option B is not going to, it's comes with more severe consequences. Okay. So we start people off with extreme things, the extreme view, because not because people are extreme, but because it's easier to see if you're doing it right or not. Mistakes are bigger. It's just easier. I know everybody wants to be Hatsumi Sensei now. I mean, not now because he's in a wheelchair, but they want to have that end result, right? Ego wants the end result without having to go through the same learning curve, right? We'd like to believe that we can cheat the system, end up as the master without having to do what the master did to get there. Okay, because drive up window syndrome. Anyway, so can we be? I guess the point of this is, can we be like the one? I don't buy into the jack of all trades, master of none. To me, if somebody's doing that, the dabbler, right, will be neither. They will be neither jack of all trades or master of anything. Okay, it's kind of like the contractor that came here and when he fixed our roof, right? He wasn't supposed to do the work. He was a general contractor. He should have hired a specialist. That's what he was paid for. Subcontract to a specialist who is a roofer, and that way what was supposed to be a 30-year roof replacement after the fire, we just had a specialist in. He told us we'll be lucky if it lasts 7 years, because dipshit decided he was going to do it all himself and pocket all the money. Okay. And so he just made it up. Okay. He's not a jack of all trades. Okay. To me, a jack of all trades is somebody who is proficient in those things. If they're not, they're a dabbler. Right. That's like people that jump around. And again, I'm going to step on toes. I know I am. So put your steel toes on. Right. that jump around from martial art to martial art without consideration of how the principles and concepts mesh with what they're already good at. They're doing it to spackle in the gaps. I get it. But there's a thing that happens in the proficiency curve toward mastery. And that thing is that in the beginning, all lessons are really big. They're profound. They punch you right in the face. Wow, I didn't know that. Right? But the more you move along, the more things start looking the same. But the lessons, the aha moments, get smaller. Okay. And sometimes they can get hard to find. But here's the thing, the big lesson is usually wrapped around that given technique or that given variation or that given weapon or that given approach. Right. So we compartmentalize. So the lesson we learned is almost isolated to that given technique. But for the upper level person, they could be doing the same technique they've been doing for 10 years. And the teacher points out, or they wake up to this this timing thing or this angling thing, or don't hit with all the knuckles, bring the one in so it's like hitting with a Shishinken but with a knuckle kind of thing, and it's putting all that power on one point. Oh, no shit. Okay. So great. Tiny little lesson, but global effect across almost every technique. And see, what happens is, for a lot of people, the dopamine rush of a new big lesson goes away. And they now don't feel like they're learning anything because they're focused on techniques, and because they keep seeing the same techniques over and over again, they feel like they learned everything. Feeling is not thinking. And so what they do is they go start another martial art because they're addicted to white belt syndrome. That's what I call it anyway, right? Where all the lessons are big again, right? All the lessons are big again. And then they'll drop that one and go, all the lessons are big again. Okay. The teachers in Japan call that being a perpetual white belt, because all they keep learning, that they're jazzed by the beginner techniques, but they never stay around long enough to refine things to get to a mastery level. So they're a jack of all trades, right? They're good at these things, but at what level? Okay. From a strategic perspective, right? One of the reasons that I have studied and gotten decent at moving around in stances and or the general movement and whatever style of other martial arts is because, from this ninja's perspective, that's a strategic smokescreen. If I can get him to think that I'm a certain type of fighter, he's going to come at me based on how he knows to fight that particular style. And then when he comes in, I'm going to do me. That's all going to go away. Right? So I'm not studying them to master them. I'm studying them to use them as a strategic smokescreen. But again, it gives me more flexibility, right? Do I show direct on, I will kill you overt thing, or do I take up this kamae, put on a certain facial expression, but meanwhile in my heart I'm something else? That's called kage no kamae, right? Well, say I need a different skill set. Also comes from the fire realm. It's the realm of discernment, assessment, right? I need to be able to read the situation. This guy, do I get a feel or a sense from him that, I put on the hardcore, here it is, and he's going to fold, right? Great. What if he doesn't? Well, okay. Now I know that I misread that. So now I'm not, one, going to show that kamae again. And two, I got to take a different approach. The cool thing is we're in an art where there's multiple approaches, right? Not just 5 elements, but there's also 9 schools, which means you can change fight tactics 9 times. Unless you just call it Bujinkan and everything looks the same, in which case you can't change shit. If things aren't working this way, I need to be able to change. If it's not working that way, I need to be able to change. Most people can't change more than once. Okay. Very few can change twice. But strategic flexibility, right? Which goes back to, we'll finish up with the title of this episode, which was the key to success on and off the battlefield. It's flexibility. It's strategic flexibility. I learned that very, very early on in this training. And coincidentally, some of you guys already know this, but coincidentally, at one of my duty stations when I was a military policeman, during in processing, met the operations sergeant, and behind his desk, there was a giant freaking poster, really big, right? And it only had a couple of words on it. So drop off our orders, he's processing stuff. And while he's writing out some stuff, he says, "You see that sign behind me?" "Yes, Sergeant." "Can you read it?" "Yes, Sergeant." Our test scores had to be higher than a grunt. So yeah, I can read it, right? I didn't say that, but he goes, "You know what it means?" I knew what it meant because I was in this art. But he said, "You know what it means?" "Yes, Sergeant." "Good. Follow that. You'll do well here." The words were, flexibility is the key to longevity. The more flexible you are, the more options you have, the more adaptable you can be, the longer you'll live. The longer you'll live a happy, well-balanced life. The more days you can get up and go at it. The more failures you can sustain and get back up again and keep moving. Okay. Now that one's flexibility is the key to longevity, but the Japanese have a saying for success, which if you only read the translation, you don't get it. But if you understand that flexibility and adaptability is one of the keys to that, it all works out. That phrase is Nana Yorobi. Nana Yorobi Kaoki. Is that right? Nana Korobi Yaoki. Sorry, Nana Korobi Yaoki. 7 times down, 8 times up. Has nothing to do with the number 7 or 8. It has to do with getting up one more time than you fell down. Most people are so afraid of falling down that they never even try. So they just blame the world and, come up with all kinds of bullshit excuses that, it's the man keeping me down. You never stood up. Okay. Well, I stood up once and I fell down, so I'm never going to do it again. I was in love once, got my heart broken. Never going to do that again. Well, shit, you ever fall out of a chair? Never fall out of bed? That mean you're never going to sit down or lay down again? Okay. It's okay. So anyway, perseverance, right? Okay. So let's do this. Let's open it up. James, questions, comments, not from you, from them. No. You have anything to throw on top of this fire? It's nice that your system worked the entire time this time. That's awesome.
Well, it's getting a little glitchy on my side.
Uh-oh, we better wrap this up. James will freeze on us.
It's trying to. I haven't seen anything else come in.
All right, cool. So I promise here in the next day or so, there'll be some emails coming out, kind of like prepping things. I have to move the days back, but this is the last time. I don't care what happens. So we already have some techniques in the can and whatnot ready to go. That's an old allusion or alluding to film and movie stuff. Anyway, so my goal is still to get the setup introductory lessons out for this Friday, and then techniques and you'll see some bonus stuff and all that. We'll get the information page out to everybody. Hopefully by tomorrow, no later than Wednesday. lessons on that side, technique, skills, and all that will start on Monday. I know it's Memorial Day for those of you who are in the States. All of our stuff is pre-recorded, so you can check in and whatever. What we're going to be doing is opening the doors for enrollment this week. My goal is to not have enrollment open past Sunday or Monday, because this has a major live component, as the earlier ones did. Sensei, will there be a do-it-yourself one? Yeah. 5 months from now, at least, right? Because we're going to get through the live component with the coaching and all that kind of stuff, get all that stuff tweaked and everything. And then it'll be evergreen, but there's also going to be a lot of stuff that you're going to see on the information page now that will not be, that is not part of the do-it-yourself thing. So do-it-yourself takes on a whole level of kind of personal responsibility to try to figure things out. So, but either way, right? So this time around, just like with Mod 1, Mod 2, when I rolled that out, is for folks that want the direct access, want the feedback, want to be able to ask questions. And they're also going to be part and parcel to helping the program become what it is. But this one coming up, this is definitely from the fire realm. This is about preemptive, intercepting, right? Taking the fight to them, right? Because we're going to be looking at situations, right? This is not a one and done, just like Mod 2 was not a one and done. This is just another strategic option. But the premise behind all of this is sometimes you can't wait for them to throw the first shot. You can't let it go to that where you're mixing it up with them, right? And so you got to take action. Okay. So this is not, now I know personality types are going to think, oh, this is what I've been waiting for, man. That's all me. Okay. Yeah. Okay. But now you're just adding this to other training that you've done. That's all you, right? Are you able to do adaptive stuff? Are you able to do evasive stuff? Are you able to do, I don't need that. Well, okay. All the fights I've ever had. Well, see, whenever somebody tells me that all the fights they've ever had or all the things they've ever done or whatever all fit this narrow one-trick pony kind of thing, right? I consider them to be extremely lucky that they've only ever had to fight somebody who fought the same way that they were used to, and that it didn't go sideways, right? Because the reality in a self-defense situation is it can start off punching, but all of a sudden a knife comes into play, or he throws a kick that you didn't think was going to come, or next thing you know, you're wrestling on the ground, or, right, you thought it was just you and him, and next thing you know, his friend comes over and kicks you in the head, right? This doesn't compute well with the sport ring fighting stuff. That doesn't mean you can't learn from that stuff. You can, right? But you have to strip away the veneer, the veil of rules and the structure of it, right? That's why most of the time I don't call this self-defense. I even stopped using the term self-protection for the most part a long time ago. I just talk about survival, because it's not the same. Anyway, all right. So hopefully I will see some of you on. I know a bunch of my guys are chomping at the bit because this is a relaunch for them. But I've got some other guys that have been chomping at the bit for, like, when can I do this? So again, I had to get through this family emergency, and so we'll make it happen. If you are listening to this after Memorial Day of 2024, what is that? The 27th? Is that May 27th? Chances are you're too late, and you'll have to look for other stuff, or just go to onlineninjaacademy.com. It's right there on the screen. If you're listening in, then I just said it, onlineninjaacademy.com, and then you'll be able to pick and choose from those, unless you're interested in getting in like the Platinum Inner Circle program, because that's the level of the folks that start to get access to me and one-on-one and or group help. So that's it. That's all I got. Anything else, James? Any last minute stuff come in?
No, sir.
All right. Well, I appreciate everyone's loyalty, trust, whatever. Right. I appreciate showing up because you're not just showing up for me. This is a you thing, right? Every time you present yourself for your more lessons or to just get, whatever, bounce things off, whatever, right? You're doing this for you. Okay. And at the same time, you're making yourself a better person for every facet of yourself. We talked about the 3-in-1, 1-in-3, and all that. That counts for us too. Okay. So you can't make yourself a better person without simultaneously making yourself a better employee, employer, spouse, parent, friend, whatever. Okay. If you're thinking about from that direction, if you're only ever thinking about martial arts techniques, well, then I'm not sure how you reconcile crossing that over to your regular life. All right. So anyway, James, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Guys, we'll talk to you again next time on KUDEN.
Get more of KUDEN Radio, subscribe through your favorite podcasting site, or join our clan of serious modern warriors at onlineninjaacademy.com.